Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, ESPN's top 100 players. We know 11 to 50, where two Timberwolves players are in that range and how that compares to Locked On NBA top 100. I think we're getting a little closer to getting it right if you're ESPN. The Wolves have a massive presence in this top 100. We'll break it all down here next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Thursday, everybody. We are only 5 days away from Media Day, and training camp is right after that, and the preseason starts the week after that. More end of the roster moves coming from Minnesota, and the black tree jerseys are back. The Timberwolves black alternates from the Kevin Garnett era. It is a newsworthy week around Timberwolves land. Today, though, I do want to continue talking about the ESPN Top 100 player list. Of course, we released our Locked On NBA Top 100 list a couple of weeks ago, and two Timberwolves players were ranked on the edition that was released on Wednesday. That's ranks 11 to 50. We'll talk about the two players ranked, where they were ranked by ESPN, where they were ranked by Locked On, and where I ranked them personally on my top 100 list, and a few surprises along the way, and then also some context related to different teams, like in terms of the teams that have the most guys ranked in the top 100 and the teams that have the most guys ranked like in the top 30, top 25. We don't know the top 10 yet, but we can kind of figure out who those guys are. We just don't know what order they're in yet. So we can start to infer some of these other things. Tomorrow on the show, I do want to talk about the end of the roster stuff. The Wolves made a couple of minor moves, G League type moves, and we'll talk about the top 10 then. But today I want to focus mostly on what we know from this ESPN Top 100 list, and we'll talk a little bit about a couple smaller news items here toward the end of the show. A big thank you here off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right, let's jump into this ESPN NBA rank. So we talked about on yesterday's show the rankings 51 to 100, okay? The short version, I'm not going to obviously go through all that stuff right now. Please listen to yesterday's show if you missed it. But the short version is we'll talk about Randle today. The short version is a couple Wolves guys were just too low on the list. Jaden McDaniels was too low. Reid was too low. Jaden was ranked 75th on the ESPN list. The Locked On list had him 65th. I had him 62nd. Reid was ranked 90th. I had him ranked 78th. Locked On had him ranked 81st. By the way, I heard a little bit of Simmons, and Zach Lowe was on the Bill Simmons podcast on, I think came out on Tuesday. I didn't quite get through the whole thing yet, but they were talking about their rank, and Simmons was talking about where he had guys ranked. He had 6 Timberwolves in the top 100. I only had 5. He had DiVincenzo at 90. He had Nas, I think in the 70s, which is higher than anybody had him. I had him at 78, but I think Simmons might have even had him a little bit higher. He was just kind of listing it on the podcast, so I didn't catch exactly where everything was. He wasn't super clear about which Wolves players were in which spot, but both him and Jaden were top 75 on Simmons' list. And that was not the case on the ESPN list. So for what it's worth, talked about that a little bit on yesterday's show. Today, I want to focus on the two Wolves we knew would be in the 11 to 50 range, Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle. And also, interestingly, I was a bit backwards on Karl-Anthony Towns. I'll talk about what I mean by that here in a minute, about where he would be ranked. So let's start with those two Wolves guys. We can start with Rudy Gobert. Rudy on the Locked On NBA list was 51. And I said, I did a short video reacting to that after it came out a couple of weeks ago. I talked more about it on this show. I think it's crazy to think that Rudy's not a top 50 guy. By the way, I'm pretty sure Simmons has Rudy in the 60s. So again, take that for what it's worth. ESPN, Locked On had him at 51. I had him at 45. And the ESPN list, I mentioned on yesterday's show, I was like, I bet they have him at 49. Yeah, he's 49 on this list. Kristaps Porzingis is 50. Rudy went from 34 on the list a year ago to 49 this year. And I expected him to be in the 40s. It's still maybe 5 spots lower than I feel like he should have been. Obviously, I had him at 45 on my list. And by the way, I'll say this, just like I don't want to. No, I'm just going to say it on this ESPN rank. The little write up next to Gobert's name was done by Dave McMenamin, and for whatever reason, this is what he says about Gobert. He says the things Gobert does well, he does really well. He shot 67% from the field. Okay, yes. Averaged double-digit rebounds for the 10th straight season. No way. And finished 9th in total block shots. It's just the areas where the 7'1" Gobert struggles. Perimeter defense, outside shooting. He's yet to make a three-pointer in his career. Yes, I'm reading that directly. That actually says it in this article. Says that Rudy Gobert's never made a three-pointer. And occasional foul trouble that make his game a lightning rod for debate when it comes to determining his true value to a Wolves team with title aspirations. Look, Dave McMenamin does a good job. This feels like it was written by AI. It really does. Nobody's sitting here going, oh, Gobert has a good shooting percentage and he averages 10 rebounds a game, but he can't shoot threes. Like, that is the most surface level. Like, I just looked at and I'm sure this is why I say it's got to be AI. Like, McMenamin knows better than this. Nobody's just looking at Gobert's career stats and saying, oh, at least he averages 10 rebounds a game. Like, it's such a surface level, if that evaluation, a box score evaluation, if you will, of Rudy Gobert. Yeah, he took a small step back. We've talked about this a lot on the show, and I said this when I ranked him a couple weeks ago. It was more the rebounding stuff, which part of that was scheme related. He was pulled away from the rim more often. You'd like him to block a few more shots, and he wasn't quite as good around the rim as he had been previously. What we don't know yet is if that's true decline. I think there's been a little decline. I think he's a half step slower rotating. It mentions his perimeter defense here. Like, I mean, find me another big this side of Bam Adebayo and Victor Wembanyama, and I still think Rudy in space is just as good as Chet Holmgren, honestly. Like, there aren't very many dudes that can guard better than Rudy that are 7 feet plus, guard better than him on the perimeter. I don't care how many times you want to watch the Luka clip from whatever it was, game 3 or whatever, of the conference finals 2 years ago. Like, Gobert, I mean, I'm sure you've seen many. There's a cut up going around on Twitter, X a couple last week maybe, of Rudy every isolation defensive possession on the perimeter for the playoffs. Pretty good. He can defend for a big guy. All that to say, it certainly wasn't his best year. He was on, trending downwards last season. Now we just have to see if shaved head Rudy, apparently shaved head Rudy is in the building now. Like, what's that look like this year for Rudy Gobert? Can he stop what looked like a bit of a slide, kind of right the ship and show like, hey, look, I've still got a couple more really good years in me that are more prime Rudy than mid-30s Rudy. He's not yet a mid-30s guy, but can he avoid that, slipping into that, range rapidly? So Rudy was a little lower than I think he should have been. The other Timberwolves guy on this list, of course, is Julius Randle. Not a whole lot of controversy here. And really neither of these. They're both in the range of what you would expect. Julius Randle was 42nd on the ESPN list. And then on my list, I had him 43rd. Is that right? I had him 43rd. And then on the Locked On list, he was 49th. So, not dramatically different. Like, Locked On actually had him ranked lower than what I would have expected. Or I'm sorry, I had him 39th, not 49th. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that's a typo. I had him 39th. Locked On had him 43rd. And ESPN had him 42nd. So actually, ESPN had him right between where I had him and where Locked On had him on the overall Locked On list. So not a big surprise there. And I don't think there's much really in terms of this write-up. Like, for what it's worth, he was 48th following his last year at the Knicks. So a year ago, he was 48th on this list. He's up to 42, mostly because he was so good in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, at least from a national standpoint. That's what people saw. Obviously, it'd be great to see, he's going to be 30 years old this year. This is age 30 season. Could we see a bit of an uptick yet from Julius Randle? Can he go another level? And one of the things we'll talk about in a minute here is the other teams in the West and how many guys they each have in this top 100, comparing the Locked On list to the ESPN list. And Minnesota's not the only team that's pretty top heavy. Minnesota has one top 40 player consensus. Like, no matter what list you look at, one top 40 player. That's a tough thing to do if you're a title team. If really your second best player is not in the top 40, that makes things difficult. And I want to dive into that a little bit more and look at that through the lens of the other contenders in the West. OKC, Denver, obviously the Fred VanVleet injury really hinders Houston this year, but I'm going to include the Rockets in that conversation, and how many top 100 and top 75 and top 50, 40, 25 guys each of these teams has. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here. In fact, week 4 kicks off tonight, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Tonight's game, Seahawks at Cardinals. Seattle's favored by 1.5. I don't mind laying that. I think Seattle wins this game. Vikings Steelers on Sunday from Ireland. The Vikings are favored by 2.5. Against Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't mind laying the 2.5 for the Vikings there either at -114. You get the Vikings favored by 2.5 points there. Minnesota -2.5. Looking ahead, Sunday Night Football, the Packers at the Cowboys. Return of Micah Parsons to Dallas. The Packers are favored by 6.5. I actually don't mind taking the favorite there either. I kind of sort of think the Cowboys have a terrible defense, and the Packers are going to wake up after a bad game against the Browns last week, and we know Parsons is going to have a big game. The Cowboys aren't going to give him a welcome home video, which is only going to be further motivation for Micah Parsons, so who knows what's about to happen. But I like the favorites and laying the points in all three of those matchups. Right now, again, you can bet $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can live bet, same game parlays, bet straight up, whatever it is you want to do. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right. Continuing the ESPN top 100 conversation, we talked about Rudy, we talked about Randle. I'm going to hit a couple other surprises. I'm not going to do all of them, obviously. And then I want to talk about some of this depth stuff that I referenced a minute ago. ESPN was way higher on a handful of guys than we were on our Locked On list. Kristaps Porzingis was number 50 on the ESPN list. He was 75 on the Locked On list, and I had him at 85. That one's probably the craziest one. Some other kind of sort of minor ones, like Mikal Bridges, 48th on the ESPN list, 59th on the Locked On list. So an 11 spot swing there. Amen Thompson, 37th on the ESPN list, 49th on our list, 60th on my list. So a 12-point difference on those two lists, and I had him 23 spots lower. I know that Amen Thompson could be incredible. He's a really good defender, but I think it's aggressive to have him as a top 40 player right now. Scotty Barnes was about a 12-spot difference. Tyrese Maxey, same thing. Derek White, same thing. Nobody else was that big of a gap. I think maybe the other eyebrow-raising one toward the top of this list was Jalen Williams of the Thunder. J-Dub was ranked 11th on the ESPN list. I had him 25th, and the Locked On Top 100 had him at 20th. 25 is maybe too low. I probably had him a little too low. I mean, he was the second best player on a title team just last year. So I probably should have had him top 20, but I think 11 is too high for J-Dub. Pull up my list, my full list here. And I mean, I just think that there's a lot of guys that, that ESPN had ranked in the, in the 20s that really should be closer to that 10 area, the 10, 11 mark where J-Dub is. So I just think it's too high. I'm pulling up mine right now. Let's see. So like J-Dub, I had him at 25. Guys that I had ahead of J-Dub that ESPN would have had behind him. Karl-Anthony Towns is one. We could talk about Cat now. I had Karl-Anthony Towns at 17 on my list, and Locked On had him at 19. So not just me, but Locked On hosts at large had him in the top 20, and ESPN had him at 27. And I said kind of offhandedly on yesterday's Locked On Wolves episode that I thought Cat would be top 20 on this list simply because he plays for the Knicks now. But no, he's still being underrated. Some of the guys on this list ahead of Karl-Anthony Towns, I just don't really get it. I think he's like, I know Alperen Şengün has a higher ceiling, but is he really better than Karl-Anthony Towns? I don't know about that. I know Chet Holmgren has a higher ceiling, but is he right now better than Karl-Anthony Towns? I don't know about that. What about James Harden? Is he actually better than Karl-Anthony Towns? I had on my list, let's see, how close did I have him? I had Cat, actually a lot ahead of James Harden. I had Cat 16 spots ahead of James Harden. I had Cat 14 spots ahead of Chet Holmgren. I had Cat 10 spots ahead of Alperen Şengün. And I stand by all of that. I just think that's a really, really low spot to have Karl-Anthony Towns. Interesting one, just kind of a fun one. Pascal Siakam, number 22 on all three lists. My list, the Locked On list, and the ESPN list. As near as I could tell, the only guy that was the exact same on every list, besides, I'm assuming, the top 3 or 4, maybe even 5, will be the same across the board. Or actually, it would really only be the top 3. But Siakam at 22 on all 3 lists, I think, was pretty fascinating as well. Let's see. Other guys ESPN ranked lower than what we had. So Cat was the big one. Darius Garland, we had on our Locked On list at 27. I had him at 28. ESPN had him at 38. So 11 spots lower than the Locked On consensus. Kawhi Leonard, I had at 10. Locked On had at 17, and ESPN had at 20. So I thought a lot higher of Kawhi than both my colleagues at Locked On and then also at ESPN. I can maybe get on board with me overrating him a little. I maybe undersold injuries that he could have this year. In my mind, he really carried that team. I know James Harden was good last year, but Kawhi was relatively healthy as far as Kawhi goes. And, had a nice season last year. And if he stays relatively healthy, I think he's pretty clearly a top 15 player. I don't think he's down at 20. The big one that surprised me is Donovan Mitchell. We had him in our top 10 at Locked On at number 9. I had him at number 8 on my list. And on ESPN's list, he's 17. I was just really surprised by that. Like, guys that he's behind on this list. Let's see. I lost, where did he go? Donovan Mitchell. There, he's 15. I'm sorry. 15 on this list. So he's 15 on the ESPN list. And then we had him at 9. I had him at 8. Like, he's behind Anthony Davis. He's behind Evan, which I understand, I guess. I don't know. I had him, one spot ahead of Anthony Davis, I believe, on my list. I had him 1 spot ahead of Anthony Davis. He's behind Evan Mobley. He's behind Cade Cunningham. I like Cade Cunningham. I had Cade at 18. He was at 12 on the ESPN list. I would still have Cade behind. Like, I don't think Cade Cunningham's better than Donovan Mitchell. I mean, Donovan Mitchell led a 60-plus win team last year. Like, what are we doing? Like, why is he behind Cade Cunningham? That just doesn't make sense to me. I understand Cade was the number 1 pick. We want Cade to be great, and he is really good. But I just think we're in, and I would say the same thing about Wemby. Like, we don't know where Wemby's ranked yet, but I covered this a couple weeks ago. I have Wemby at 16 on my list because settle down, everybody. Like, he's got to play a full season. This team has to win games. Wemby on our lockdown list was at number 7, and I'm expecting him to be in the 6 to 8 range still on the ESPN list. I just think that's probably where he ends up. And I just think we got to see more and more consistency, or maybe more consistently from Victor Wembanyama before we hand him a top 8 spot. I just don't know that we're quite there yet. The last thing I want to hit related to ESPN rank versus Locked On rank is the number of top guys that were in each of these lists. So a couple of weeks ago, I broke down the Locked On NBA top 100 player list, and I rattle off a few different observations, and I'm going to compare those observations to the ESPN list and see if they're still true. So, like, for instance, the Lakers having 2 top 12 players on the Locked On NBA list is pretty significant. For, the only team to have 2 top 12 guys. That's still true on the ESPN list. We don't yet know where LeBron and Luka rank, but they're not on the list yet, which means that they're definitely not just top 12, but top 10 guys. I had LeBron at 11 on my list. The Locked On list had LeBron at 12, and he's in the top 10 on the ESPN list, which I think is pretty fascinating. Oh, I should mention also, there were so many guys that I just listed that ESPN had ranked higher. It is important to point out, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, on Wednesday's show, that guys who are out for the season are really not, or even long-term injured, are not considered on the ESPN list. So this panel is more than 150 reporters, editors, producers, analysts, and they took out guys with long-term injuries. And actually, on this version of the article on ESPN, they added the list of guys that were excluded from this list. So these guys weren't listed out yesterday when I did the show, but now it lists Jason Tatum, Tyrese Haliburton. Those are the 2 big ones. Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving, DeJounte Murray, and Fred VanVleet, who just got hurt this week, have all been removed from the rankings. So those guys would otherwise all be top 100 guys. Like VanVleet, I was curious to see where he was because we had him in the 60s on our list, 64 in the lockdown list, and I had him up at 61. So that obviously changes the complexion of how many guys each of these teams has in the top 20 or top 100 or whatever. Either way, no matter how you slice it and dice it, the Lakers have 2 guys in the top 12 or top 10, which remains true from the lockdown list. I want to hit a couple more of these things, compare the Wolves to the Cavs to the Thunder, the Wolves to the Rockets to the Thunder to the Nuggets. We'll do that here in a second. We'll close with a couple other quick Wolves notes, and that's how we'll finish out the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at SKIMS. When I found out that SKIMS was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard a ton about their quality from friends and family. I had to give it a try. And also, by the way, SKIMS was kind enough to send me a couple of pairs of underwear, actually. And I'll tell you what, it absolutely lives up to the hype. Super soft, comfortable. Who hasn't had issues with underwear in the past? It might just be fit. Overall, it might be simply comfort, the material, whatever the case might be. You're finding the right style. The SKIMS men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I chose the SKIMS stretch 5-inch boxer briefs. I like a little bit longer boxer briefs myself, but I want them to feel comfortable without feeling like I'm wearing workout underwear. I walk a lot during the day, and they have to not ride up. They have to not chafe. The material has to be comfortable. But again, I don't want them to be like straight spandex underwear. That's not what you want. But guess what? The 5-inch stretch boxer briefs really do feel like I found the missing link. They're perfect for what I do, for when I'm walking around all day. They move with me. They never lose their shape. They stay in place all day long. If you're just running errands, whatever it is, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear you can find. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. Shop SKIMS Men's at skims.com and let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows. Select the Locked On Wolves, the Locked On Podcast Network in the drop-down menu at skims.com. All right, let's close out the top 100 discussion. We talked about the Lakers having 2 guys in the top 10. On the lockdown list, there were 7 teams that had 2 players in the top 25. Okay, so Lakers 2 top 10 really matters. 7 teams with 2 in the top 25. The Lakers, the Knicks, the Cavs, the Clippers, the Celtics, the Pacers, and the Thunder. Now, with the injuries to Halliburton with the Pacers and Tatum with Boston, that obviously takes those 2 teams out of it. So on the ESPN list where they were not considered, they do not have 2 top 25 players. The other one that is not included on the ESPN list would be the Knicks, because of who is it that's ranked in a weird place for the Knicks? Somebody is it's not Bridges. Anunoby. Oh no, Towns. Towns, who we just talked about on the Locked On list, was top 25, was top 20. He's 27 on the ESPN list. So the Knicks lose their top 2 in the top 25, or 2 in the top 25. So according to the ESPN list, the Lakers, Cavs, Clippers, and Thunder are the only teams that have 2 players in the top 25. And I said this a couple weeks ago, but Minnesota is the only conference finalist that doesn't have 2 top 25 guys. Well, I suppose I'm including the Knicks in that, but at least on the Locked On list, that is. So that leads us again to the roster depth question, and you compare some of these teams to each other. Another kind of way to slice this, Cleveland on our list was the only team that had 3 players in the top 27, because Darius Garland was in the top 27 on our Locked On list. Darius Garland was, let's see, where did we have him? We had him at 27. I had him at 28, but according to the Locked On list, he was 27. He's 38 on the ESPN list. So the top 3 in the top 27 goes away. Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell are both top 15. So you could go, Cleveland has 2 guys not only top 25, but they have 2 guys top 15. So Lakers have 2 top 10. Cleveland has 2 top 15. And then the Clippers and the Thunder are the only other teams that have 2 top 25. Not only that, OKC has 3 in the top 25. On the Locked On list, it was 3 in the top 30. On the ESPN list, it's 3 in the top 25, because Chet Holmgren is at, what did I say he was, like 23 or something kind of crazy on the overall, 24 on the ESPN list. Okay, so Lakers have 2 top 10. Cleveland has 2 top 15. The Clippers and Thunder have 2 top 25. And in the case of the Thunder, they actually have 3 in the top 25. Cleveland has Cleveland loses their third in the top 27 because Garland is 11 spots lower on the ESPN list. So some discrepancies there. It still is true, though, that if you look at the only teams that have 6 guys in the top 100, still OKC and the Knicks, Denver, Boston, Minnesota, Cleveland, and Indiana all have 5 in the top 100. Houston only has 4. And this was pre-Van Vliet injury, according to ESPN. Now, we would have had 5 because we would have had Van Vliet on the Locked On list, but he's not on the ESPN list. So that, I guess, you could lump Houston in with the Minnesota, Boston, Cleveland, Indiana Nuggets kind of tier. But according to ESPN's list, Houston, post Van Vliet injury, only has 4 guys in the top 100. Minnesota has 5. Denver has 5. OKC has 6. So, which is interesting to me because there's still this kind of consensus thought, like you look at the FanDuel odds. We talked about this, I think, on Tuesday's show, how good the odds are for Houston to still win a championship, still greater odds than Minnesota. I think people are not realizing the depth advantage. Well, especially with the Van Vliet injury, the depth advantage Houston did have is partially gone, and Kevin Durant is not Kevin Durant from 10 years ago. Ant's a better player than Durant is right now. Şengün might be better than Randle. I mean, he is better than Randle, but and that's where you start to get into like who's the second and third best player, and that was the point I started to make earlier, is that Denver has the number 1 player on this list. But where's their number 2 player? Like, according to our list, Jamal Murray is still top 40. On ESPN's list, where was Murray? Jamal Murray was 46 on the ESPN list. He was top 40 on ours. He was 34 on our list, and I had him at 36. He's 46 on the ESPN list. So according to ESPN, Denver has the number 1 player, and, well, I'm assuming Jokic should be 1. And then number 46. Minnesota's going to have a top 5 or 6 player, and then Randle on the ESPN list is 42. And then you look at the other contenders in the Western Conference, and OKC has 3 in the top 25, as we've talked about. And Houston has, with the Şengün piece, we don't yet know exactly where Kevin Durant's going to land, but we know he's top 10. And then you add in Şengün, and he's 25. So Houston then also has a guy who's top 10 and then a guy who's 25. So it depends on how you want to slice it and dice it. But Minnesota and Denver are in similar spots where they have a deep team that's top heavy with a star. And then what's that secondary star look like? Can Julius Randle or, I doubt Jaden McDaniels becomes a top 25 guy this year. But like, what happens with that number 2 spot in Minnesota? What happens with Denver? Is it more or less likely that Jamal Murray becomes a true number 2 than anybody on Minnesota's roster stepping up for that role? And does the overall depth that Minnesota has, does that outweigh the advantage at the top that the Lakers have in the top 10? Pretty fascinating things to really kind of dig into a bit further. As I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about the roster stuff. There were a couple of guys signed to Exhibit 10 deals. The Wolves they did some signing and waiving to maintain G League rights. We'll talk about those guys on tomorrow's show and what that looks like in terms of the training camp roster. The one note that I did want to hit today, though, is that the Timberwolves have re-released the classic black alternate jerseys with trees that they wore during the Kevin Garnett era. And the team did a really great job of posting about this on social media throughout the day on Wednesday. A lot of great pictures. Latrell Sprewell sat down for an interview, and yes, he was holding a pair of Spree wheel shoes, which was amazing. Like a 2-minute interview and great Spree pictures of him holding the shoes, wearing the black jersey, crazy stuff. Lots of promo shots with basically everybody on the Timberwolves, everybody in the rotation on the Timberwolves. Jerseys look great. And perhaps the more exciting news, in my opinion, or I would say equally as exciting, is that the court is coming back. The parquet court with the trees lining it on the black baseline and sidelines with the trees lining the sidelines. It doesn't look like there's trees on the baseline at all. But otherwise it looks almost identical with the parquet and the black and gray circle at the top of the key. Really exciting stuff. I'm pumped to see the court in action. We know what games they'll be wearing their jerseys. I don't think we know what games the court will be in action. unless it's all, I don't think it's all the home games when they're wearing the black alternates, but we will find out. There's also some great Joe Mauer promos on social media. Crazy stuff that this is happening finally. But we'll keep an eye on, let's see, actually. Oh yeah. So there's 7 away games that they're going to be wearing these jerseys on. We don't know if it's all of the home games when they're wearing the jerseys that they'll also do the classic court, but I am pumped to watch these in action. The first time is right there at the start of the season. It's like October 26th or something like that. So, going to be a ton of fun. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's what I grew up with, and it's gonna be so much fun to watch Ant just yam on somebody wearing those jerseys. So, all right, that's all I got for you today. I'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna talk end of the roster. We'll talk top 10 of the ESPN Top 100 where Ant lands, and any issues that I have as I quibble with those rankings as I likely will. But also talk what the training camp roster looks like, and also what we know about the G League Iowa Wolves to this point. So we'll do all that tomorrow. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that you can listen to all the Locked On NBA Top 100 reaction from this show 2 weeks ago. Just go back in time 2 weeks. I did 5 shows and talked all about it. If you want to listen to the Locked On reaction to our own list, go check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And the experts that cover these players and teams every single day have outstanding takes on where these players are ranked in our Locked On NBA Top 100 list. Of course, this show is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.